Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced and welcome to another video on Ruby on Rails. So in the last video we kind of just did the basics of routing. Basically we just did a couple little routes and made a set up a controller. Now in this video we're going to take it a step further. We're going to learn about resources. Resources allow you to set up a bunch of routes at the same time. Okay, so we're going to go to our practice route here, or practice project here that we made in the first video. And basically it all comes down back to our routes file and our config. So in the config folder, there is a routes.rb file. Okay, again, this is where we define our routes. So here I'm just saying there's a get route that points to this controller and then this view in that controller. Now what I can do is, there's oftentimes where you're going to create things that need full CRUD, meaning they don't just need one route to get the information. You need a route to get all of them. You need a route to create them, a route to edit them, update. So Ruby gives you a way to kind of, and you see this again in a lot of more modern day frameworks, a feature called resources that lets you create all the routes. Now I'm pretty sure there's a command that'll just kind of generate the whole thing for you, but we're going to kind of manually set it up step by step so you can kind of see what each piece does. And basically what I'm going to do is just create here resources colon, and the resources in this case will be dogs. Okay, so we're gonna have a resources called dogs, which will mean we already have these routes exist, and you can actually find out what routes currently exist in your project by just typing in, let's go into the folder cd practice, and here you just type in routes or Rails routes, and this will look through the project and determine all the different routes that currently exist for the project. This might take a second. So while it does that, let's take a look. Okay, in this config folder, there's a lot of other stuff to kind of be aware of. One of the things that will be coming up next is this database.yaml file. This is where you would configure your database, whether it's Postgres or whatever. Okay, you read the docs to figure out what kind of database you're going to be using. I'm going to leave the default settings, which creates an SQLite 3 database in your development folder. So we could just use that for development, potentially for deployment if you're using like your own VPS. But if you're using Heroku, you're probably better off using Postgres. So we can just use this for now. And then when you deploy, you just change the settings to, and then you can specify different databases too. That you just have to read the documentation on how to edit this YAML file. And if you never use YAML files, basically what it is, it's just basically a key, and then keys within that key are tabbed. And that's pretty much the gist of it. So you see, like, this is the default database, and then the details of that default database are tabbed, and then basically this file gets parsed and used. So let's see what happened here. Okay, so here, or something went happen here. Okay, Rails routes, traceback most recent call, load, require. Compare, see if I set that up right compared to the way I did it over here in my practice project. Resources. Oh, I see the colon's kind of off because that's supposed to be a symbol. I see. So resources is like a function saying, hey, we're gonna create resources, and again in Ruby you don't necessarily always have to put parentheses around the parameters. So it's resources, and we're just saying resources are gonna be the symbol dog that will refer to things throughout the project. So let's do Rails routes. Let that figure that out again. Okay, and here's another reason why you need, like, make sure you have yarn installed. There's this thing called Webpacker that just doesn't work if you don't have yarn installed right. And what Webpacker is, it's a module in Ruby that essentially configures Webpack for you. And then here's like where you can set up all the settings for your Webpack if you wanted to edit it. And again, that's also a YAML file. So lots of YAML files in here. Okay, and again, it's just another markup language. So it's like using JSON or YAML or TOML or Markdown, although Markdown's probably more for like docs. Cool. Give me a second. Let me just see if there's any other files worth mentioning while I'm here. There's a lot of stuff going on in Ruby on Rails. Again, you don't have to make use of all of it, but it's there. Gem files are kind of like your, if you've used Node, it's like your package.json file. It just lists all your dependencies. Okay, so that way, when you move the project to other places, it makes sure to get the things you need. Okay. A rig file allows certain tasks to be sort of configured. Not super familiar with how rake works. There's a package.json just because, again, it is using Yarn. Okay, and again, there's a Webpack dev server because that's what's being configured by Webpacker. Here's all your Rails dependencies because, again, it's going to be using certain aspects of Node under the hood. Actually, has some really cool features just for you to configure. What, did I actually ever run the command? Oh, there it is. Here's all the routes. Okay, so you can see here, dog. See, we haven't really done anything other than write resources dogs, but now it thinks that there's a route for each of these. Although if I were to visit it right now, again, the way it works is that I would type in like dog slash, let's see here, for example. I would type in like dog slash new, and so it's going to look for a template. It's going to go look for the router, the controller called dogs. And right now, if I go to the controllers folder, okay, there is no controllers called dogs. So let's create one. So let's put in that command. Rails generate controller dogs. Okay, and again, that'll generate the required files. And even then, that still won't quite do everything we need, but again, we would build all that there. So essentially, we would have to create a function called index, create, new, edit, show, update, destroy. And then those functions in the controller would then be called upon when these routes get called. But now I don't have to set up the routes. All I have to do is just set up the controllers at this point. And there it is, dogs controller. Okay, so let's just do, and then I can just set all these up. So it would just be def index and def create and def new and def edit and def update and def destroy. End. Okay, we'll leave it like that right now. There's two updates. We'll revisit like how you would distinguish between those two updates, but basically that's essentially what it creates. So we have a controller and we have a function in our controller referring to each one. So right now by default it's just going to go look for. So right now if we were to go to the index route, which is just dogs index, it would just be slash dogs. And let's see here, let's go to views, create an index for dogs. So C creates a new dogs folder for our views, index.html.erb. Okay, and here we can be like h1 hello world. Okay. Now we just put dogs, so that way we know this is the dogs one. Okay, now let's go run our server. Rails server. So essentially what you did is you generated the routes. Let's just wait for this to set up. but again, pretty straightforward. So again, we go to our routes file. The Rails server realizes there's a resources called dogs. This dog symbol, I'm pretty sure that's what you do when you put the colon in front of it. This dog symbol basically tells Ruby that there should be to refer to a dog's controller. So that then it looks in the controllers file to see if there is a dog's controller, which is now there. And then again, based on the function, it will call the appropriate route that it expects. And by default, it'll go look in the views folder for a view, but you could also put in custom code here, which we'll explore later on. So let's see here. Now we got there. Let's go to dogs. Give that a second as it renders. And there we go. We get hello world dogs. So it took us to our index route. Okay, and then that's essentially how to set up a resource. Okay, then we have to go back and kind of define what these other routes are, but that's going to require us to have a database. So in the next video, we'll go over models and how to create a model. And while we're at it, let's just take a quick look. I think there is a command, so that way all this can even be easier, because it's just like instead of generating a controller and then adding resources directly to the routes file, I'm pretty sure there's probably like a generate resource. So let's take a look. Rails, let's see, I think it would be like help. Here we go. Rails, display this help message. Taking a look at all the help for the command, silent trace, no search, multitask, jobs, rules, Rails help, options, targets, build all. Okay, I mean that's all fine. Let's do this. Rails generate help. I want to see what the help command would be on the generate command. Here we go. Args dash help and generate options and usage. And let's give me the list of generators. Here we go. Generator. Yeah, here we go. We can create a resource. So let's do that. Rails generate resource help. I'll make sure all this is set up. Generate resource post, no attributes. Good, that's what I thought. Just want to make sure that we could do this. Okay. So this is basically kind of like when you put in a model, you can put in the other properties. So I can sit there and say, so I'll just do this real quick. Rails generate a resource. Let's generate cats. I'll just say cat uppercase. Okay, and a cat has a name, which is a string, and an age that is an integer. Okay, and let's see if that all works. So Rails generate resource cat, name string, age integer. And what this should do is actually generate everything. Yep, nice. So now if I go to my routes, okay, there's cats right there, resources cats. So see, it did it for me. And if I go to controllers, let's see what it spun up for me. Controllers, channels, no, controllers. Hello controller. Huh. I guess it doesn't generate a cat controller, or at least not there. Interesting. Let's actually look through what it created. Created a model. Good. Created a migration file because we had the properties. Models, fixtures, controller, app controllers, cats controller. So app controllers. Oh no, I'm looking in the wrong application. Here we go. Controllers, cats controller. There it is. Okay, and it just has that. So we still have to create all the routes. Views, we go to views, created the views folder. Okay, cats helper, cats CSS, created a CSS file for that cats helper. Okay, so you still have to build out all the routes. Okay, but now you know. So at least you don't have to, you can just do resources and it at least spins up this. And if you name the properties, it'll create your models file, which is over here. See cat. So we have the model, but then more importantly, we have our migration file, which should be in the database folder. DB, migrate, and see now we have this file here that'll help us create a cat in our database. But we'll go over more about models in the next video, so I'll create the dogs model first, then we'll actually add both models to our database. I'll see you guys there.